So I'd like a warm applause for Stefan Sagmeister. How did you find Mrs. Walsh, Stefan?
Well, it was easy because she came into the studio.
Is it working?
Yes. So, yeah. She came into the studio. She started as a regular designer, and but it turned out that she wasn't a regular designer. So she was exceptionally talented and has, probably more important than anything else, an exceptional sense of common sense. So I think that she really knows what works intuitively. And so after I've been through that process many times before, that I had working somebody with me, you know, the studio is now 22 years old, and I knew that she had the quality and the ambition to open her own place, and I've supported many generations of that before, and I'm quite proud that many design studios came out of our studio. But I just basically got bored the 5th time around in looking for somebody else to replace Jessica. So I thought, well, let's try something different and make her a partner. And that basically worked out. The first round, we said, let's try this for 3 years, because both of us are not great in committing. She actually is much better. She just got married, so she at least on that point is much better. And the first 3 years worked out really, really well. And we just agreed to do another 3 years.
Okay, and she's more in-house and you're more outgoing, like sitting here, talking here?
I think more so, but I mean, she actually does quite a little bit of that herself. But the idea for sure was that it would free me up. I mean, basically, we're doing 3 directions. So we're doing the commercial world, the cultural world, and the personal world.
What is the cultural? I get it. Commercial. What's personal for you?
Basically, it's using the language of design for a much more personal expression. Like, I find that me as a person, I'm involved in everything. I meet friends, I go to the supermarket, and I go to the museum. And very naturally, like most anybody alive, I go from one of these worlds into the other without very seamlessly. Sometimes they overlap because I take friends into the supermarket. And so it makes a lot of sense to me to do the same thing in my work, as in that I use the language that I know how to speak, design, in a expression that is commercial. I use it as an expression that is cultural, and I use it as an expression that is personal, meaning like some other people make, I don't know, music that's personal, or make films that are personal. We make designy things that are personal. And some of these are, you mentioned the Happy Phone, we're still working on it. It's a total pain in my ass and was unbelievably difficult. The show that you showed a little bit, the Happy Show, that really worked. Right now it's in Vancouver. It's the 7th stop. It had over 250,000 people, and I get mails, meaning like of anything that we've done, of anything in the last 22 years, including for the very last things. The feedback we got from the exhibition was by far the biggest. I mean, hundreds of letters of visitors that write 3 or 4 page emails. So that are clearly and there is no email address, but there is no call to action or any of that bullshit, like, write to us. Meaning like somebody would have to see the exhibition, would have to somehow find in their wherewithal to figure out where we would be, who we would be, where we would be, find the address, and then write this thing. I mean,
and your personal work is, by personal work you mean not client work. So you define the boundaries and the character of the work.
Yeah, but it's also personal, as in that work would also be the content would very much be informed by my life. Like that, of course, that things I've learned in my life, the same would be part of that. Yeah. And Jessica did a blog about a dating project that she did with a friend that she dated that got hilariously successful 10 million unique visitors sold to Warner Brothers, they're making a romantic comedy about it. So,
and is there an overlap between your commercial work and your personal work?
very, yeah. So basically the personal work very much informs the commercial as far, because we are freer and more open to try out stuff. It also, then the commercial work tends to influence the personal, because we learn about new technique or stuff that we normally probably wouldn't use, new technologies that are, because they're often expensive, not readily available to be played around with. So we get to know them in the commercial work, but then use them in the personal. I think ultimately both sides are better off. And I had, like, luckily, I can say this, luckily I made enough money so far that I wouldn't have to do commercial work. Like I could also, you know, just do personal work or just basically stop having an income. Yeah. And when I decided, so that question was really alive, should I do that? It was financially doable. And I didn't because I actually think that the influences of the different worlds are healthy to each other. I guess. And I think it would be too difficult. Like, I find the personal work to be much more difficult than the commercial. The commercial stuff is very easy because I've done it many times. It's basically, you know, if you've branded a museum once, the third museum, it's pretty easy to do. Okay. Because the problems are similar.
And saying that in client work, I put it on there, how to make great stuff, what I see is that up front when you start a project, and maybe you guys recognize this, we have a big dream like this flying saucer, and it's really great and it's really big, and you pitch it and the client likes it, and the idea is really marvelous, it's epic. And it's very hard to leave it, to get it like this in the end of your project. And in the hardest case, you end up like this, you know? And a lot of your work is really, really strong. How do you, in your client work, keep this quality high? How do you make it so that you don't lose half of your quality or half of your concept halfway?
I mean, we have a couple of systems. One is that we only take on clients that are smarter than me. That gets rid of a shitload of problems, because stupid people normally have stupid products and stupid services, and they're fuckheads and they're a pain in our ass, and we don't want to deal with them, and it's a pain to go and meet them and all that stuff. So if they are smart, normally we can learn from them. And that's fantastic. I mean, I think that first decision takes care of a lot of trouble.
So it's selecting the right clients.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I do get better, but you know, I mean, I see that many of you, maybe all of you, have been in this business for a while, so I'm sure that that's the same for everybody. I mean, we get better in seeing red flags in the very beginning, and then it's just, in our case here, of course, we never grew, which turned out to be a fantastic decision in that way, because you know, we normally take on 1 out of 10 clients. Right now it's so booming in New York that we possibly take on 1 out of 20. So we can afford to see that, like we can afford to say, oh, red flag here, no, red flag there, no.
What is your major red flag?
I mean, ultimately I think sort of like the easy description is, do they have a product that has a product or a service that should be in the world? Like, does that thing have a right to live? Would we use it? If we wouldn't use it, we don't take it. And that again takes on care of a lot of problems. And I know agencies think about this differently. I recently read a Charles Saatchi interview where he talked to a Guardian reporter. And the Guardian reporter sort of like accusingly said, how could you as a liberal, as being politically liberal, do the campaign for Charles Saatchi? Sorry, for Maggie Thatcher, and put that conservative into the parliament. And Charles sort of like belittling told the reporter, well, are you really that naive that, you know, just because I own a cat, I can't sell dog food? And I say, yes, you idiot, that's exactly what it means. That's exactly at the heart of the problem. That's why everybody hates advertising. That's why nobody wants to see your shit. Because everybody knows that you are lied to. And that lying or that inauthenticity is the reason why advertisers around the world are basically seen in the same scumbag level as lawyers. Because there is all that inauthenticity around.
Okay, but you did some campaigning.
We did, yes.
And are you suggesting that you are the only agency?
Oh no.
No, there are more in Tiger.
Oh yeah, totally. No, I think that's basically,
it's good to hear.
This stuff is I understand it's much easier for us because we are small and it's very easy for us to pick and choose. Once you have a large organization with a giant overhead, just the economic realities will force you to take on things that you might not want to take on. And I understand that.
So that means that if the size of your company grows,
yeah,
quality decreases.
That's definitely for the companies that I worked for personally, that was definitely the case, yes.
Is there any exception that you know of? Large company still making great stuff in your eyes?
Well, I mean, obviously there is a lot of places that have in-house departments that are doing exceptionally well. I mean, if you look at the in-house departments of Apple or Nike, the output is, the quality is extremely high, even though they work in very large organizations. But I find these, if you look at the size of the Apple in-house design department, it's tiny. I mean, it's microscopic in compared to their worldwide influence. And even at Nike, the pieces are relatively small and broken up into relatively tiny groups. And of course, obviously, there is sometimes large places who do a good thing. But whenever I research it, it then seems that that good thing came out of a small group of mostly 3 people. And whenever
within the company.
Yeah, and whenever the company puts 10 groups on it, all 10 groups fuck up and do absolutely nothing or do shitty work because they all think that, oh, the other group number 4 is probably doing something nice. I don't really have to try out.
Anyone recognizes this, guys? No, no one does. That's great. All right, let's move on. A lot of your work is about aesthetics, and a lot of your work is about it's really looking good and it's really made to look good. And how do you see, for example, in your portfolio is an iPad app, and it really looks good. How do you see this tension between functionality on one? You recognize it?
Hardly.
The tension on one hand, the functionality, and on the other hand, aesthetics. Is there a versus in between, or how do you see that?
I mean, I don't think that this is one of our more successful projects up there. But in any case, I completely, utterly changed my mind about this. I used to be very much a conceptual, idea-based designer where both the form and the style came solidly out of the idea and was treated sort of like as the little stepchild at the end of a project. And just over the years, I found that sometimes accidentally, that the pieces that we made where we took the form very seriously worked much better. And in the meantime, and I think I made a bigger project out of it because I think it's a really, really big problem, is that in the meantime we take it very seriously, and our newer projects, and you'll see the shift within the studio from old to new, our newer projects are, well, the formal expression is much more sophisticated, but what we find is that they just function so much better.
Because of their aesthetics?
Yes. Yeah, and I found that this whole idea that basically the Germans came up. You know, I mean, I would say there's a couple of people to blame, and I can see that one would be Adolf Loos from Vienna, the other one definitely would be Mies from Germany, and then of course Corbusier from Switzerland, who after World War I basically broke down beauty. And beauty, you know, from the 19th century was, you know, still regarded in the 19th century as this value on the same area as goodness. And then considering that all these nations basically slaughtered themselves in the most brutal way, nobody really was interested in that value anymore. And there was, you know, in the art world, of course, it was, what's the fountain? Most important piece of the 20th century, the Pissoir by Duchamp, thank you. That basically, that very much was thought of as a statement, as an anti-aesthetic statement. That, and the Duchamp collectors really thought, no, look at it, it's still beautiful, it's like Brancusi, you see the lines going down there on the Pissoir. And Duchamp had to come out and say, no, this is not like Brancusi, this is really art without aesthetics. Which was an interesting thing to do in 1917. And we've had 100 years of this bullshit now. 100 years, it's so boring. I mean, really, this whole idea that beauty is not important. I think that the sentence that goes the most on my nerves is design group heads saying, oh no, we are not about beauty, we are not about making things look good. Well, most of the people who say this sentence have no idea on how to make things look good, because it's actually extremely difficult. Like, try it. It's extremely difficult to do. And if you do try it, you will find that your stuff, whatever your functionality is will work much better. And I think that I actually have real, proper, and very, very good scientific evidence why this is so. Because I think beauty is at the extreme heart of what it means to be human. And if you look at tools if you look at prehistoric tools, that stone axe that has been found in Europe, in Africa, in the United States, by the hundreds of thousands, was the longest tool that humans ever used from 1 million years ago until 40,000 years ago. Every single one of those tools is symmetrical. And there is no functioning reason for it to be symmetrical.
It's about beauty.
Yes.
Okay.
They made it beautiful because they wanted to. And this was before we had language, before we talked to each other. So there is something in there that's very much within us.
And how does that relate to the fact that I see a lot of people who say, okay, yeah, for example, I use that app very often, it really works well. I hear that more often than people who say, well, I use that app very often, it really looks well, it sucks how it works, and it offers me no functionality, but it really looks well. There is a trade-off there.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that there is absolutely no reason why something that works really well cannot look really good. And I actually think, or not I think, I know, that something that works really well will actually work much better if it looks really good.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And I think that that is true for products. I mean, very, very clearly, I mean, you know, just look at the company whose product, like, if you ask anybody on the street, which company has the product that look the best, just from an aesthetic point of view of the large companies, probably most people would say Apple. It also happens to be that Apple is the biggest product, or the biggest company in the world. So I mean, I'm not even sure why I'm talking here. I mean, it's like so clear. It's like so obvious. But clearly it isn't, because otherwise I wouldn't have to get excited. Because it's such a new system. Like this whole and it's the same in the art world. Like there is not a single artist around contemporary who actually comes out and says that his work or her work is about beauty. It's like beauty is sort of like you can build a whole career on kitsch, as Jeff Koons demonstrated very clearly. You can build it on disgust. You can, like Damien Hirst, you can build it on all sorts of human endeavors. But beauty is somehow out, I think that is stupid.
So you're saying there's no reason not to add beauty to what you're making.
Exactly.
Functionality is core, but add beauty to make it appeal.
Yeah, and I think that it turned out that if functionality really is all that you're looking for, we've seen so many spaces. I don't know, in architecture, if you look at social housing, where it was, the only idea was to make it as functional as possible. Get as many people housed as cheaply as possible. Turned out it didn't work. 15 years later, they all needed to be dynamited because nobody wanted to live in these buildings. Because they were, even though the only direction the only reason they were built was functionality. One thing, ironically, they didn't do was function. Yeah. And I think that so much of the stuff that design companies propose in meetings and can show very clearly around the meeting table that how well it works, but at the end nobody uses it somehow. Mm-hmm. And so that meaning, of course, it doesn't work.
It needs to appeal.
Yes.
All right. You told me that once, and maybe you guys know this, I've read it. Once in a while, I mean every 7 years, you take some time off. And I thought I found this one. It was on your website. Hello, you've reached Sagmeister. We are conducting a full year of experiments, and we'll be back on September the 1st, 2009. And then, very funny, please call us then. All right. Why do you do it? What? No. What does it bring for you?
Well, it's of course when we started this, it was scary, and I thought we're going to get definitely forgotten, and probably we'll have to restart the studio from scratch. That all our clients will leave us, and none of these fears turned out to be true. The guy that you mentioned, Nurit, actually moved his release date so that we could design the new album cover. But I think that the main reasons, and there's many, but at the extreme core of why I keep doing it, was because it was successful. By successful, I mean is that it's the best strategy that I'm aware of that makes sure that I see the work that I do as a calling rather than as a job. And that's absolutely unbelievably crucial. Like that makes such a giant difference. Like when I teach, and I teach at a high-end school, I teach a little bit only like 3 hours a week. Almost all of my students, I would say 80% of my students see design as a calling. They're really into it. And I know as they go out there, with some of them it only takes half a year, with some of them it takes a couple of years, they lose that calling and they see it as a career. Sort of like, still very interested, but not quite sure if all that hard work is really worthwhile. And then it goes down from a career into a job where they, and I heard recently from a friend who works at a fashion house at Donna Karan that the majority of the conversations he overhears in the elevator of this design firm is, oh, thank God, it's 4 o'clock, only 2 more hours. Or, thank God, it's already Thursday, only tomorrow, and then it's the weekend. And that's the work that you produce within that mindset, of course, is inferior, and then you go down the spiral.
So you need to fresh up.
Yeah, I think that's number one. Then number two is that it allowed, for every 7 years, it allowed an incredible redirection of the studio that turned out to be unbelievably good for the studio. So for example, the first 7 years we did a lot of stuff for the music industry. In that year off, I redirected and we got out of the music industry. That was luck, because I didn't foresee it. So by the time the music industry collapsed, we were long gone and somewhere else. But let's say the whole idea or the direction to do this more personal thing was created in the year off, and just proved to be incredibly healthy for the studio and for the mindset.
And we have a lot of CEOs here.
Mm-hmm.
Should they do it?
I think so. And I know some of you probably will find this difficult to do, but I've talked about this in front of CEOs that run also very, very large companies, people like thousands of people. And I did it one time. I did a very much more comprehensive talk on this subject. And at the end, it was a very large conference with 2,000 people. And at the end, a couple of hundreds came up to me and said they're going to do this. I mean, for the rest of the conference, it's a 3-day conference, for the rest of the conference, almost constantly people came up, and I didn't believe any of them. Like I thought, yeah, right now in the spur of the conference you feel like that, but tomorrow you're going to have forgotten it. But I went back to that same conference the year after and the year after. And not hundreds, but dozens of people actually came up to me and said
they really did it.
Yeah. And there is massive of, I just recently read that's appropriate, I just recently read a story on NPR, on public radio, on their website, of a guy who credited his sabbatical to me. It was an Asian designer who worked in Canada, took his family for a year to Norway, and did mostly family stuff in his, I think that he also did a tight plan, very much like I did, and out of his weekly, I saw the schedule, it was I think 30 hours were family oriented, fishing with the boys around Norway, and he had 10 hours where he wanted to design some sort of app that had to do with voice recognition, because he was an app designer. And he came back after the year and put it into the iTunes store, into the App Store, and I would have to look it up. I think it pays him now $10,000 a week. So he basically designed himself out of a job.
His new sabbatical.
Yes. So I think he does go back to work simply because he wants to, but he wouldn't have to. And I'm sure not everybody quite. I don't think that every story was quite that way. But the people in the second and third year of the conference came up to me. There was not a single person who had even the slightest percentage of regret. Like they were all extremely enthusiastic about it.
Okay. And anyone here has intentions in this direction? Intentions to take a year off sometime?
That's okay.
Yeah, the one over there you have planned it already. Oh, that's great. Somebody has done it already? No? Okay.
But you know, there is plenty of examples. Google gives all their, I'm sure you're aware of that, I mean, such a famous thing. Google gives all of their software engineers 20% of their time, which is actually a similar kind of percentage, to create whatever they want, or whatever they're interested in within Google, and that's been working out extremely well for Google.
All right. Let's see what we got. Oh, you had I found a little rant on storytelling. Oh, damn, give it away. Anyone here who does storytelling? Oh yeah, sure, no one. Okay, let's take a look at it. Can you start the movie there?
Okay. Hi, my name is Stefan Sagmeister. I am an Austrian graphic designer who lives and works in New York City. Well, I'm actually quite critical of the storytelling theme. I think that all the storytellers are not storytellers. Like recently I read an interview with somebody who designs roller coasters, and he referred to himself as a storyteller. No, fuckhead, you are not a storyteller, you're a roller coaster designer, and that's fantastic, and more power to you. But why would you want to be a storyteller if you design roller coasters, or if you are storytelling, then the story that you tell is bullshit? It's like this little itsy bitsy little thing. Yes, you go through the space, and yes, you see other spaceships, and yes, that's your story. That's a fucking bullshit story. That's boring. People who actually tell stories, meaning people who write novels and make feature films, don't see themselves as storytellers. It's all the people who are not storytellers, who kind of, for strange reasons, because it's in the air, suddenly now want to be storytellers. There is this fallacy out there. I mean, I don't think that I fell for it, but somehow, maybe unconsciously I did. You know, that you sort of feel, I've seen a lot of films, so I must be able to do one. And of course, this is the most stupidest thought ever. You know, it's like, oh, I've watched the Philharmonic, that's why I'm a virtuoso violin player. You know, well, I'm not, even though I've watched a lot of Philharmonic concerts. I think by now, in our space, meaning in the space of design, it sort of took on the mantle of bullshit. You know, now everybody's a storyteller.
Stefan, is it about the word? Because this roller coaster guy I think he's trying to make some, I don't want want to use the word, some story. So you start off and you go through something and it deals with some fantasy and stuff.
Well,
Is it the word or does it go deeper than that?
no, it doesn't keep me up at night.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Basically, I just feel that in our space, there's an incredible amount of terminology bullshit. You know, whatever, 20 years ago it was thinking outside of the box, and then 10 years ago it was creating an experience, and now it's storytelling. It's all the same shit. It's like, it's that I think there's an insecurity that what we do is worthless. So it has to be dressed up with terminology that is inauthentic. And I think that many areas have that. Contemporary art has it incredibly. I mean, you know, art speak is much worse than design speak. It's like, you know, try to read a label at a museum, you know, oh, it's about, you know, investigating strategies of gender politics or whatever bullshit. Architects have it incredibly. You know, it's amazing how stupid or if you actually read an architectural monograph and you translate it into regular language, it's amazing how little it says once it's freed of its own terminology or of its slang. And I think that there used to be a time around maybe 20 years ago or so when people actually were intimidated by that kind of crap. And I think by now it's much more normal to get, I don't know, pulled off. I've definitely seen people actually being taken off stages because they insisted on using the slang of their own profession, and it was not cool. Like they looked like fools, and I'm all for that. I think that almost every expression that we have can be expressed in understandable and plain language. And if the thing that you suggest to a client actually does what you want it to do, that normally is expressible in very plain terms. If it doesn't do the thing that you claim it does, that's, I think, where that desire comes in to dress it up in some sort of terminology.
You're on the wrong path.
Yeah, and I mean, the branding world is full of it. I mean, you know, if you, I don't know, just go to any big branding website and see, you know, and it's amazing. And I've talked to, I talked to the European head of Interbrand once after two or three whiskeys in a hotel in Ponteresina, and you know, he would be the first to admit what kind of crap they have.
Yes, I guess. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Okay, Stefan, I'm looking at the clock. We're going to an end. I'm going to skip these. This is one of the lessons you've learned, and this is about the end. You say material luxuries are best enjoyed in small doses. Well, we're looking to get you the whole Rijksmuseum. That didn't work, so we have a small dose for you. Marjan? Could you bring it on? We need you. Thanks. Thank you. So that's one for you. Thank you.
And I do believe in the small doses. I think it allows luxuries to actually remain remain their meaning. If it's around all the time, at least in my case, I get used to it and it has no meaning as well.
Great. Thanks for having you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.